Hey, everybody. Before we get into today's episode, wanted to share a message that I got over on the show Instagram. Go follow the show on Instagram for whatever reason. I don't know. But we'll call him JB. JB sent us a message every now and then gets messages. You can text the show directly. There's a link in the show description. I can't respond to those just because it's how the system works for some reason. But you could also just message me on Instagram or go to johnhensonwrites.com and message me on the website, and I'll respond to those. But nice message from JB. Thought I would share. I wanted to thank you for the podcast. Recently had to spend some time in the hospital, and the podcast kept my mind at ease. In between the monitors, outside noises, and nurses, I had trouble focusing on rest. I've never stayed in a hospital, but my wife has because she had kids, and sounds about right. I simply started back at episode 1. Why? Those aren't good episodes. I think they're better now. Some of them are duds every now and then, but the first 25 episodes, not great, but whatever. Started back at episode 1, closed my eyes, and everything else kind of went away in a few weeks. I'm a few weeks behind on the new releases, but I'll catch back up to them before too long. Sorry it took so long to read this message based on when I received it. I record ahead, you know that. When you call your hobby silly, boring, or just something to channel your creativity, just know there's at least one person out here that looks forward to Mondays almost as much as they do 5 p.m. on Fridays. Aw, that's sweet. That made me happy. Give the wife a hug from a listener. No, she's my wife. No one else can hug her. No, that's fine. And pass along a big thank you for giving you the time and space to entertain. She doesn't know that she does this. I record, and granted, she doesn't just leave the house on purpose to let me record. I just record whenever I'm alone and I have a chance to. And those times are few and far between at this point, but we're still getting it done. We're recording several weeks ahead just in case I don't ever have time. But thank you, JB, for the kind message. If you want to send a nice message, or if you want to just be a troll, that's fine too. It's just nice to know that you're out there and you're listening. So thank you for the messages. And let's get into this week's just insane episode.
This is a podcast.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm your host, John Henson, and today I teased it last week, but this is a real weird story. All right, there's so many layers to it. There's con man, fraud, kind of culty, but also a sovereign nation involved, just so many things, and I'm going to try to do my best to make this all make sense, but it's going to be a wild ride. So this is the story of Branch Vinedresser and the Dominion of Melchizedek.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
So we start in the 1980s when California businessman David Pedley was indicted for fraud after some suspicious land deals that went through. However, Pedley fled to Mexico before his trial, where he quickly ended up in a Mexican prison after he was caught illegally exporting pesos. While in prison, Pedley found some sort of religion and wrote his own book, the Melchizedek Bible, which was mostly just ripped off from like this low-level Hollywood faith healer that he had found. Unfortunately, though, Pedley died in prison before he could be extradited back to the States and, like, I don't know, maybe grow whatever kind of cult he had in mind. However, the U.S. government kind of believed that Pedley was like a real-life version of George Bluth from Arrested Development, and didn't like actually believe that he was dead. He kind of just believed he faked his death in a Mexican prison and would just show up running his company somewhere else. So they showed up at the funeral home where Pedley's corpse was allegedly resting to fingerprint him. Pedley's son, Mark, refused the request and actually had his father cremated before police could properly obtain a court order to get the prints. Now, instead, although this has never been confirmed, authorities believed that Pedley had faked his own death, bribed Mexican prison guards, and continued working on his shady business deals behind the scenes and through his son, Mark. Who knows? But because David Pedley was now legally declared dead, Mark inherited the Melchizedek Bible Project and made it his entire personality. On a bus ride back to California from Mexico, he received a mystical revelation from God telling him to start his own country based on the teachings that his father wrote in the Melchizedek Bible. He quickly changed his name to Branch Vinedresser and founded the Dominion of Melchizedek, which was going to be like this Vatican City style enclave whose sole mission was to achieve world peace, albeit through committing a lot of crimes. Now, for some context, right? Melchizedek was a priest from the Bible. He's in Genesis 14, 18 through 20. He blessed Abraham following the Battle of the Vale of Siddim and Abraham's rescue of the captives and plunder taken in the battle. He's also mentioned again in Psalm 110. But basically, where the real meat of it comes from was in the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament. Jesus is identified as the high priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. And so just all kinds of stuff from biblical. So one of those like vague biblical points where people have like probably given it more reverence and power than it really actually had. But that's the foundation for this group / cult / nation that Pedley is putting together. Now, pausing there, because elsewhere in 1984, a guy named John Gillespie tried to rig a horse race in Australia by swapping out a slower horse with a faster horse that looked identical to it. Unfortunately, the faster horse got injured just before the race. And like Gillespie, in trying to rig the race, basically he had put a ton of money on this fake horse to actually win because everyone thought it was super slow, but it was actually a fast one. But that horse got hurt and he was just going to be out a lot of money, supposedly. But rather than cut his losses, Gillespie like frantically went out and found another fast horse. Unfortunately, though, it looked completely different from the first two. So Gillespie bought hair dye and dyed the horse fire engine red, which I still don't think looked like the other two horses, but I don't know, whatever. He and two accomplices then sprayed white paint on its legs to make the horse look like it was wearing socks. I don't know. Now, all of this paint and hair dye understandably stressed the horse out. It probably also really blocked up its pores and everything and made it, overheat, pissed it off even more. So Gillespie tried to calm the horse down with a saline drip, which only caused this horse to bleed uncontrollably from its nose. And yet, despite all of that, somehow this horse still won the race. However, Gillespie and his accomplices were arrested. And that's not a weird side story for no reason. All right, it is connected because following Gillespie's release from prison in the early 1990s, he joined Vinedresser's Dominion of Melchizedek government and actually traveled to the Philippines to scam Filipinos into buying fake passports. So like in just a matter of like 5 years, right? Branch Vinedresser, he has built this whole fraudulent scam company, and he's recruited people and all that. It's just not that interesting to the story, right? Because there's nothing like huge going on. But Gillespie gets out of prison. He joins this group. And like one of the first things he does is he goes to Philippines and starts running a fake passport scam. He claimed that he was the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Dominion and promoted, quote unquote, citizenship by investment, in which individuals could acquire a Dominion of Melchizedek passport for $3,500. And like, that's not really how passports work. Like, yes, you have to pay processing fees and all that, but it's not $3,500. And yet all of these Filipinos, and again, and it just kind of shows like how poor education is in a lot of parts of the world. Like this dude just shows up from a country that doesn't exist and was like, hey, I'll give you a passport and you'll have citizenship in this country. You just got to pay me $3,500. And so many impoverished citizens forked over their life savings under the belief that the passports would allow them to find higher paying jobs in the United States, which makes no sense because they could just do that with their Filipino papers. But whatever. Other people paid thousands of dollars in fake processing fees to apply for government jobs in the Dominion of Melchizedek, which Gillespie claimed was a very wealthy country in the South Pacific. And you would think, like, Philippines, also in the South Pacific, you would think they would have heard of this country. And, you know, I could understand maybe saying, oh, yeah, no, it's in the Caribbean or it's in the, you know, Southern Atlantic, whatever, and maybe you wouldn't have heard of it, but it's in the South Pacific. It's in the same region you're in, but whatever. So while Gillespie was scamming all of these Filipinos, Vinedresser was back in the States with his wife, Perlasia Gamboa, promoting a company called Currency. And it's spelled current, S-E-A. Not like currency like money, but current sea, like the ocean. And Vinedresser, he claimed that he owned 10% of the world's oceans, which is not actually possible, by the way. However, no one was really interested in also not owning a piece of the ocean because that's like his whole idea was like, I own 10% of the world's ocean, and for just a small fee of probably like $10,000, you too can own part of the ocean. No one cared about that. And why would they? Like, owning the ocean is pretty stupid. So Vinedresser abandoned that scam in favor of selling fake Dominion of Melchizedek currency that he claimed was backed by $400 million in platinum. And that's not real. Over the next several months, Vinedresser and Gillespie ruled the Dominion, with its actual citizens basically just being their employees of scammers and con artists who would sign an agreement to, quote, live according to the principles, constitution, and laws of the Dominion of Melchizedek, and hereby tender my irrevocable proxy for the Dom House of Elders to vote on my behalf at all future Dom elections. Weird. See, that's where it's kind of like a cult, right? Because he was hiring or giving citizenship to all of these low-level criminals and scammers and con artists, and they were then signing this pledge to basically, whatever the Dom House of Elders is, to vote on their behalf. Like it wasn't like a sex thing. It was just like a formal government cult thing. It's just so weird. So after finally being arrested for the Filipino passport scam, Gillespie then traveled to Hong Kong, where he entered a bank and somehow successfully deposited a $318,000 check under the name Crown Prince Gerald Dennis Sane Wittgenstein Hohenstein of Melchizedek. How? Crown Prince Gerald Dennis, dumb, Sane Wittgenstein Hohenstein of Melchizedek. And the bank was just like, yeah, sure, we'll take that. And then when they realized that the money had been drawn from a non-existent bank, they sent police after him, who actually quickly tracked him down and discovered that he had been living in the Hong Kong airport for the last month. He's, oh God, what is that, Terminal? That Tom Hanks movie? We're just living in the airport? That's what this guy was doing. Gillespie tried to get diplomatic immunity, but the court rejected his request because the Dominion of Melchizedek was not a real place. So dumb. Now, around the same time that all of this was taking place, Vinedresser's wife, Perlasia, applied for a $20,000 car loan in California and claimed that she was the owner of Bank Asia AG. It's not a real place. However, when employees at the bank where Perlasia applied for the loan couldn't find any evidence of Bank Asia, Perlasia then changed her story and claimed to be the president of Melchizedek and provided stacks of paperwork that allegedly proved that Bank Asia was a legally registered company in the Dominion of Melchizedek. It wasn't. Like, there probably wasn't even anything in it. Also, here's the dumb thing. Like, if you're applying for a car loan and you say that you're the owner of a bank, why would you not just get a loan from the bank that you own? Like, that's so stupid. Like, say you're employed literally anywhere else and it may have gone through, or she may have at least gotten a little bit farther, but then just plops this stack of papers that says, no, Bank Asia is a registered property of the Dominion of Melchizedek. And bank employees in California, they're a little bit smarter than Filipinos. And wow, my stomach is growling. I don't know if the microphone picked that up, but it like vibrated the whole microphone. Anyway, but yeah, bank employees smarter than Filipinos. They're like, yeah, Dominion of Melchizedek's not a real place. So unless the bank is registered in a country we've heard of, you're not getting your money. They called the police and got her out of there. Over time, though, while all of these scams and everything was going on, Vinedresser became increasingly concerned that someone would soon realize that the land owned by the Dominion of Melchizedek was only technically Vinedresser's house. Like, he's basically taken his property that he owns, his house that's on it, and he's basically saying that it's its own sovereign nation. And no one questioned it. Like, no one just questioned that a house at 2300 Dingleberry Avenue was this own nation that the United States government had just somehow completely overlooked. This one property on its tax records and state tax records, and it was just this completely different nation, like it was an Indian reservation or something. And Vinedresser, he's starting to get worried that people are going to figure this out, that it's actually not its own country. So, in response, he started trying to claim other lands as its territory, starting with Malpelo Island, which was basically this uninhabited rock 300 miles off the coast of Colombia. And to his surprise, he was very shocked to learn that Colombia had not only claimed the land, but actually also kept a small military outpost there. He's like, at this point, he's just looking for like random dots on a map to just claim all willy-nilly. And again, it's kind of that Trump personality and some of these other psychopaths where, like, if you just say it and no one, like, questions it or pushes back on it, it just must be true, versus like maybe just no one cares and they're just letting you be crazy. Undeterred, though, by missing out on Malpelo Island, Vinedresser then claimed that the Dominion had purchased the island of Caratane from the Kingdom of Polynesia, which did not exist. The island, Polynesia does exist, but the island of Caratane does not exist. In reality, Caratane was kind of this underwater reef south of the Cook Islands in the Pacific Ocean and not an actual island with land that you could step on. So with no other viable land for sale, Vinedresser just began claiming to own 23,000 square miles of Antarctica, as well as Clipperton Island in the Pacific Ocean. And Clipperton Island, if you might remember, we covered that way back on episode 255. Basically, it's just this island out off the coast of Mexico where this one dude, like, it got ripped up by a hurricane, but there were people out there farming bird poop. And then he just went super crazy and like tried to rule over the island, which was mostly just women at this point because he killed all the dudes. And then they got rescued. But it was crazy. That's a crazy story. Well, Vinedresser, he is claiming that he owns this island now. And the island, so no one really questioned it because no one really cared, right? So in 1995, he's still, I don't know, he just wants attention or he's trying to just take this even farther. But in 1995, Vinedresser sent a fax, not a letter or an email, which email probably not really around then, but like not a letter, not a phone call, but he faxed a serious warning message to newspapers and foreign embassies all over the world. And that message said, under the Constitution of the Dominion of Melchizedek, war has been declared on France. The declaration is made on behalf of all mankind. It is with reluctance that the Polynesian Melchizedek Dominion declares war on France, since up till recently, France was considered a silent ally. The Ruthenian Melchizedek Dominion is considering aiming at France the nuclear weapons left behind in the Carpatho Mountains by the Soviet Union as leverage in the war. So many problems with that, but we'll break it down a little bit. Despite this serious threat, no one could actually figure out where the Polynesian Melchizedek Dominion was located or why they were so mad at France to begin with. The only person that really truly knew was Vinedresser himself. Also, I don't know why he called the Melchizedek Dominion the Polynesian version and the Ruthenian version in the same message. No idea. Also, the Carpatho Mountains are not a real place. They are the Carpathian Mountains. I know it's picking hairs here, splitting hairs, but whatever. Also, he claims that he has, there were no nuclear weapons left behind by the Soviets. It's whatever. Well, for context, all right, and here's why Vinedresser was so mad at the French. Back in 1985, French spies planted a bomb on the Greenpeace ship Rainbow Warrior in New Zealand because Greenpeace, they're, activists and all of that. France actually, bombed one of their ships, Greenpeace's ships, killing a photographer who was trapped on board when the ship sank. The incident reminded everyone in the South Pacific of France's less than stellar history of nuclear testing, which is what the Rainbow Warrior had been in the area to protest to begin with. Well, to kind of expand on a little bit further, like over the course of 30 years, France had detonated nearly 200 nuclear bombs on atolls in French Polynesia, exposing roughly 100,000 people to dangerous levels of radiation. And again, the Soviets were doing the same thing. United States were doing the same thing, but apparently France, maybe they were doing it a little bit more risky. Maybe more people were endangered because of what France was doing. I don't know. But apparently Vinedresser, that goes against his mission of world peace. And so he waited a decade to just declare war on France. A year before he made this declaration of war, France had announced that nuclear testing would resume, which really conflicted now with his mission of world peace. Even worse, the testing was going to be very super uncomfortably close to Vinedresser's imaginary Dominion of Melchizedek location of Caratane Island, which risked, obviously, the lives of all of the Dominion's fake citizens that didn't actually live there. So, because of all of this, he had no choice, you guys, but to declare war on France. So, when media outlets actually picked up this story, Vinedresser panicked as if I don't know what he expected. Like, you send a message declaring war on a country as on behalf of a country that doesn't exist. Of course, media outlets are going to pick that up. It's crazy. And so he panics because he didn't think that would actually happen. And so he issued a statement to the Washington Post claiming that he and his cabinet had only discussed the idea of declaring war and that the press release had been drafted and sent out by accident. Classic PR. He then claimed that his declaration of war was a spiritual one to quote, bless our enemies, but made sure to note that nuclear weapons were still available to them if they needed them. They weren't. A few weeks later, France actually announced that they would be reducing the number of nuclear tests from 8 to 6. And Vinedresser, after hearing about this, released another statement declaring victory in the war that was never actually real or fought. In reality, Australia, the reason France did this was because Australia was in the process of organizing an international boycott of French goods, which threatened France's economy, because that's how you do things now. After several weeks, back to one of the other issues going on. After several weeks of prosecutors rifling through stacks of worthless documents about the Dominion of Melchizedek and whether or not Bank Asia was a real thing. Remember, we're back to that. Perlasia's fraudulent bank loan case went before California's banking regulators, who quickly realized that there were way more scams that Perlasia and Vinedresser had been running. In response, Perlasia informed the deputy attorney general that she would, quote, do metaphysical battle with you in your dream state, and if you interpret your dreams correctly, you will know that I am the victor. That is such a stupid thing to say out loud, and I think she fully believed it. She also emailed a critic who was who was writing stories about this case, and she accused this critic of being possessed by Satan and the devil, because apparently they're two different things, and that they, quote, should have to bite your tongue hard until it bleeds, and your hands will be cut into several pieces until you are no longer able to write or post malicious and vicious lies like in the Wikipedia. And she spelled Wikipedia Wickipedia. There's no C in Wikipedia. So this lady's a dummy. But it wasn't just Vinedresser and Gillespie and Perlasia running all of the scams in the Dominion of Melchizedek. They had a whole network of people doing dumb stuff. In the late 1990s, Jackpot Enterprises, the slot machine leasing company, started having financial problems. To their relief, a company called LVEH came forward and offered $85 million for a takeover. LVEH claimed that they had just traded some of their mining claims for $2.7 billion in government bonds from the Dominion of Melchizedek. They also claimed to own a warehouse full of gold dust, which in reality was just a pile of dirt. However, everyone at Jackpot Enterprises took LVEH's word at face value, and before anyone could realize that the Dominion of Melchizedek didn't even exist, LVEH's stock doubled. That's how far they've gotten with this. They have made this a public company that is openly traded on the stock market, and it's not even a real thing. They just own things that they say are totally different than what they really are. You want to tell you have a warehouse full of gold dust, not gold bars, not gold coins, not gold nuggets, gold dust. Gold dust. Piles of gold dust. And no one's going to verify it. No one's going to double check you on that. You're just going to take your word at face value and say that, you sold mining claims for $2.7 billion in government bonds from this other country that you've suspiciously never heard of. Like, again, this is one of the most satisfying things that I've learned about being an adult. Like, as kids, we grew up thinking that adults were so smart and like they knew everything, and that everything was just this complicated, sophisticated network of intelligent people keeping the world turning. And that's not at all what's true. The entire world is full of idiots, and it's honestly a miracle that everything keeps running on a daily basis. There's so many stupid people in charge of making very important, very critical decisions. And it all works out. And so that's what helped me stop worrying so much about everything. It's like especially as I've looked through history, because it's not like a recent phenomenon either. Like, there have just been stupid people in place, like all in the 60s, the 50s and 60s, especially when the United States was, advancing a lot of science and technology and all of that. It's just a bunch of idiots looking at things they found in sci-fi books and be like, yeah, let's try it. And they did. And so that's just the world. Like, you should try to be as intelligent as you can, but also understand that the world around, there's so many stupid people around us, and everything's fine. And if something bad does happen, if we do have a bad day, the world heals itself. It's totally fine. And so, whatever. So that's one instance, right? That the Melchizedekians scammed this fake company, doubling their stock on the stock market for just lying about things that they don't own. Another fake Melchizedekian, Gilbert Ziegler, was an American who had been scammed into purchasing one of the Melchizedek passports to begin with, but not to be defeated. He actually took advantage of the scams and actually started using the passport that he got to travel back and forth to the island of Grenada in 1997. During one of these trips, he announced that he was opening a new bank on the island and used a photo of a ruby that he didn't even own as proof of his capital. And the bank at this island just was like, yeah, that works for us. Just get it to us when you can, buddy. And they gave him a $20 million line of credit. And so, Jesus, with his new bank and his new line of credit, Ziegler began running his own Melchizedek schemes. He flew wealthy investors down to Grenada and promised 300% returns for investing in his bank, even though nothing ever in the history of ever has produced those returns. If someone comes up to you and says, yeah, man, I can 300% return on whatever you give me, don't listen to him. You're never seeing that money again. Ziegler soon received $140 million in investments, which unsurprisingly soon went missing and sent his angry investors after him. In response, Ziegler fled to Uganda, where, of course, he's going to go scam those people. They believe everything, right? We talked about it last week with Good News International Ministries. They don't believe anything out there. And so he lived in former Ugandan President Idi Amin's old mansion. And he just kind of gave it to him. In 2004, Ugandan police arrived at the mansion to extradite Ziegler back to the States to, face all of the criminal fraud charges he had on him. When Ziegler refused to come out, police opened fire and riddled this mansion with bullet holes before successfully extracting and deporting him. However, Ziegler died in the States while awaiting trial. By the end of the 1990s, the Dominion of Melchizedek had become so popular and so infamous in kind of the underground crime syndicate, I guess is the best way to put it. But other con artists from their own fake countries began teaming up with them. In one instance, Chief Wise Otter from the sovereign Cherokee Nation Tejas approached Melchizedek citizens with an insurance scam. So now you've got scammers just trying to scam other scammers. And also, the sovereign Cherokee Nation Tejas is not a real place, by the way. He claimed that his fictional country had been created after a hurricane blew through a portion of the Rio Grande and created a sandbank in which a group of white con artists labeled as unclaimed territory to create a new country. That's not how that works. All right. Despite all of this insanity, Vinedresser continued various scams under the Dominion of Melchizedek name. However, thanks to the 9/11 attacks, airports finally began rejecting Vinedresser's passports, mostly because they did not look remotely official. And that's how crazy life used to be before 9/11. You could just show up to an airport with whatever papers that you wanted to claim you had. And the gate agents were just like, yeah, sure, dude, whatever. This is the airport. Nothing could possibly go wrong here. And so finally, after 9/11, they started cracking down on it. And in 2010, Vinedresser was sentenced to 2 years in prison after he sold more than $1 million in non-existent stocks in a non-existent Melchizedek company. Perlasia, his wife, was also arrested after she tried to steal $300,000 from a mechanic in Palo Alto, California, to redevelop the Queen Mary ocean liner. Okay, they didn't even own the Queen Mary. I don't know why I guess she wanted to try to go buy it and do something with it. Anyway, 2 years later in 2012, a man named David Parker Williams, and let me tell you how this dude stylizes his name. It's David Parker Williams. Now, I mean, we're all familiar with hyphenated names, but a colon in there, a colon that separates your first and last name, that's pretty stupid. He announced that he had taken over the Dominion of Melchizedek. Williams was a sovereign citizen who believed that the government secretly incorporates every newborn baby as a corporation as a way of control. And that's not how that works. Like, that's like someone who took one business course on like business formation and like then thinks that the government just like, there's not even a reason for the government to do that. To just register every baby as a corporation. For what? For what? Corporations don't pay taxes, you know? And like, even if they did, you're not going to get taxes from a baby because babies don't have income. And then at that point, you just pay individual income tax as like a person based on your Social Security number. It's so like, it's just an unnecessary thing to think that. Also, I will explain the punctuation. He believed that colonizing, I guess, his name frees the individual from this corporate rule because, I don't know, I guess corporations can't have colons in their name. None of it makes sense. He also, as part of his alleged takeover of the Dominion of Melchizedek, denounced the Melchizedek Bible and declared that Vinedresser no longer had control over the Dominion. Outside of a few random press releases granting fancy titles like emissary extraordinaire to missionaries in Liberia, the Dominion of Melchizedek has just kind of slowly faded away. It's just gotten too hard for them to commit or, make scandals or whatever. Vinedresser, as far as I can tell, he was released from prison in 2012. Nothing else has happened with him since. His wife, as part of like her fraud stuff, like she was ordered to pay a $650,000 fine. She was also permanently barred from selling penny stocks. Last kind of update on her, she had not paid the fine. She was trying to get the decision overturned. All that kinds of, like, there's probably still some investigations and cases pending against them, but it's also been like 15 years. So maybe nothing is actually going to end up happening. They're probably still running scams in some way, I would assume, because it's not like they're able to just, have their own jobs, but just a crazy, it's just weird set of stories and scams that these people were running. There you go. The Branch Vinedresser and the Dominion of Melchizedek in the books. I don't possibly know what we could learn from this story. Don't scam people. Just get a job. I think that's like these scammers. I've said this before. If these scammers put just as much energy into scamming people as they did just like a regular job, they would be just as successful. And people wouldn't get screwed over on top of it. It's crazy to me. Like, that's the personality type where it's just easier for you to do fraud and scam people and be a dickhead than to just get an actual job. Because it's the same amount of energy. It might even be more energy to scam people because you've also got to be constantly covering your tracks. Anyway, I don't know. What did we learn this week? I think that's pretty much the gist of it. Other than that, next week on the show, we are into July. That means it's another weird fun bag. We're looking at the stories of Albert Stevens, the Phantom Barbara of Pascagoula, and the story of Eeyore Bach. That was a weird dude too. So it'll be a great weird fun bag next week. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends and keep it weird.
This is a podcast